And if you understand the doctrine, then you understand why things are progressing the way that they're progressing. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the doctrine, because it's not optional to understand this. It's absolutely crucial to understand this. You can't underestimate the power of ideas and also the power of words, of course, because ideas are expressed in words. But you see, the postmodernists completely reject the structure of Western civilization. And I mean completely. So I can give you an example in one term. Jacques Derrida, who's head trickster for the postmodernist movement, regarded Western culture, let's call it the patriarchy, as phallogocentric. Okay, so phallo comes from phallus, P-H-A-L-L-O. And so that's the insistence that what you see in Western culture is the consequence of a male-dominated, oppressive, self-serving society. And we might say, well, you know, societies do tend to be self-serving and people in power do tend to act in their best interests, but a tendency is not an absolute, and that's one of the things that needs to be considered continually. There are no shortage of flaws in the manner in which we've structured our society. And compared to any hypothetical utopia, it's an absolutely dismal wreck. But compared to the rest of the world and the plight of other societies throughout the history of mankind, we're doing pretty damn well, and we should be happy to be living in the society that we're living in.
Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact? Are you irritated? So I would say you could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality. So men and women are different on height. They're different on muscle mass. They're different on where fat is deposited on our bodies, right? Our brains are also different. So there are some binaries.
Cowards! Security! They shut off the volume. Can you hear? Can everybody hear? All right, well, we're going to raise our voices. The conversation's going to go on.
Okay, even the women in there have been brainwashed.
I have a really good patch on my jacket. No, you want to film my patches on my jacket.
Whereabouts are the patches?
Oh no, I haven't touched anybody.
Yeah.
Give her space.
There's not much I can do about that.
Oh gosh, you touched me.
The thing that strikes me about speaking to you is that there are rules to this game that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, the term usually used to describe postmodernism is a cultural logic. It is a new cultural logic which goes against the modern ideas that we had before. It is unrepentantly irrational. It doesn't make a pretense to be reasoned, and it doesn't make any pretense to be evidence-based. It can look like inconsistency, it can just look like hypocrisy, irrationalism, it can look hateful, and you really need to understand that this is the inevitable consequence of seeing society as constructed in language into hierarchical systems of power.
Here, you can get your black diversity.
What's that?
So you can get your black diversity on camera now. We can get a real whole group. I even got Abe Lincoln for you. So
You're too close. I can't actually get you with this lens if you want to be in.
That's really unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. They very obviously don't want to.
So tell me about your thoughts. Tell me about your thoughts.
My thoughts?
Yeah, on the event. Why did you do what you did?
So if I were to tell you any thoughts about this event, it would be more than this event is worth, honestly. Like, you can't...
But you've come here. You've come here.
You can't argue against like what is a fact. Like I don't pay $2,000 of student fee funds to argue that a triangle is round.
Yeah.
And they're arguing, not only are they arguing that the memo wasn't set, you know what, I'm not even going to engage in that shit.
He didn't even mention the parts
it.
of the memo that were, in fact, accurate to what they are portraying him as, which is saying that there was biological
But that
determinism.
actually doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That actually doesn't matter, because this has never been about James Damore. It's been about freedom of speech, and it's been about exercising power.
I'm oppressed. He's oppressed.
The interesting thing to me as I'm reading and looking more into this is that these concepts have paper, they have academic background.
They began as academic papers. I mean, there's a certain sort of feedback loop going on between activists and academics. But yes, I mean, white ignorance, I think that was Mills, and white fragility is Robin DiAngelo. White talk is McIntyre. So we're coming from the postmodern premise in the first place, and then we're building on that to develop concepts from that, and then further concepts from that, and there isn't anything pushing back at it. There is nothing, there is no dialogue, a conversation going on about whether cultural constructivism actually is the right way to go.
So there's no criticism of the cultural critics?
Not within the field, no. There is a point of production, and then there is a point of sort of dispersal of these ideas. You know, we have people, undergraduates going to university, that's, you know, somewhere between 20 and 50% of the population, depending on where you are. They are being taught these ideas, they're having to research them, they're writing them, they're going off then into industries all over the place, from business to media to healthcare to education. And they have been taught this conception of society as operating within constructed knowledge and systems of power.
Right. Saw that nice verbiage in there. Saw that veil, sexism, racism.
So what's the enterprise here? What are they trying to achieve? From some of the reading and hanging out with you guys for a while, I'm starting to figure out they feel as though the world is constructed by language, and people are programmed by the language systems around them. So if we can reprogram the language, we can reprogram the world.
Exactly, yeah. And people are not always aware on all levels of what they've been programmed with. And so this needs to be pointed out, to be called out, as is a very common term now. And people are expected then not to question it, but to accept it and address it.
They kept a strict hold on everyone had to keep the same ideas, and anyone that steers away is seen as sort of an apostate from this religion, and you have to punish the apostate to keep everyone together.
So underlying a lot of these battles that are taking place is two different conceptions of the world. You would say one is modern and the other is postmodern.
Yes.
And if you buy into one or the other of these conceptions of the world, you can't actually hear the other side because your fundamental principles are different.
Yes.
And so you're speaking from a different position. In effect, you're speaking a different language.
Yeah, and you hear each other differently. I have so many of these conversations now where people are just utterly bewildered by each other.
Well, why don't you listen? You could listen and then
Why would I listen to somebody telling me a triangle's round?
But they're having
to fascism.
They're having a Q&A at the end.
Speech is not free speech.
That makes no sense.
This is an interesting thing because I have smart friends within Google, and they were writing long rebuttals to Damore's memo within my social media networks.
Were they rebutting what he actually said, or were they rebutting?
No, they weren't. They were. It was a rebuttal of. It almost seems as their interpretation of what he wrote, but when I read it, I couldn't see what they saw, and I would you know, there's part of me that wants to send them an inbox message and say, hey, did you actually read that? But I'm scared shitless. I'd probably lose those friends.
Yeah.
And so, how do we explain what's going on to that friend?
You know, a lot of it was just trying to help our culture at Google, and but if you look at the surveys now, it seems like about 80% of conservatives feel like they can't speak at all now, which is really disappointing because, you know, the psychological safety, which is something that I cite in the document, is just being able to bring your whole self to work and feeling like you can speak up without being harshly judged. And that was, you know, one of the main measures that they saw actually improve team performance. But that's precisely what we don't have now, which is really unfortunate.
I am reacting that way because I want to keep you safe.
Do you want to share your thoughts?
No, I already did.
Do you have any more thoughts?
No.
I'm interested in your thoughts.
I have a thought.
You're
Why are you
interested
here?
in exploiting me.
I'm interested in your thoughts. That's why
You're
I'm here.
interested
Are you
in
being paid to be here?
exploiting me.
No.
No? You
It's off my own
volunteer?
back. I've come all the way from Australia to see what's going on in
For
your
what news
universities.
publication?
No, it's just me.
Uh-huh.
I'm interested in what's going on here. I'm actually interested in your thoughts.
Kiwi Farm.
All right, so here's my thoughts.
Cover the people!
Thank you.
People do not have the right to tell you what you can and cannot listen to. This is a university. If we cannot have this conversation here, we can't have it anywhere.